So it is Monday, and yet again the beginning of the week in our lovely world of Transformers, and we're going to jump into a Transformers Slag podcast Patreon listener question today. Once again, if you want to be part of the Transformers Slag podcast, help support the podcast, let us know we're doing a half-decent job here in this crazy Transformer world. Again, patreon.com/Protoman, or check the pinned comment or description below. What does it get you when you throw your hard-earned money at us to let us know that we're doing some entertaining stuff here? Well, it gets your name in the end credit scroll at the every segment moving forward, access to our exclusive Discord where we break the news, share lore, share deals, and share everything. Hey, you want to save money on Transformers? Check out our Discord. We have tons of deals. Black Friday's coming up. There's going to be thousands of links out there, and we're going to make sure it's all in one place so you could save money on your hobby. Heck, get yourself an ARC or a Black Sarek for some cheapy cheap. Check out our Discord. And again, depending on what tier you're at, you might get yourself a little something in the mail, access to our giveaways that we do every single live stream recently. You know, we're going all the way to Christmas to give away stuff so people have happy holidays and free Transformer toys in your mailbox. And of course, depending on what tier also, you get access to ask the Patreon listener question. We got a Patreon listener question from longtime patron Billy Brigham, or Billy B, as I like to call him. And he wants to know, hey, Proto Man, I got a listener question for you. How many Transformers Unicron Trilogy characters were inspired by existing characters? I'm not referring to ones that shared the same name, but characters that had alt modes or character designs that were very similar to stuff in the past. For example, how Armada Jetfire was inspired by Galaxy Shuttle, or Energon Downshift to G1 Wheeljack. I would suspect that Armada Optimus Prime's alt mode had partial inspiration from Star Convoy, given the conventional cab to treads and the rear of the trailer. But I'd like to know how many other characters also pulled this kind of inspiration. Similar to also like how the Multiforce from Transformers Victory had very big similarities to Energon power linking, like Jetfire to Ironhide and the inspiration from Mach Tackle, for example. Thank you for everything you do, Billy B. Well, thank you, Billy B, for the Patreon listener question. I'll tackle the Multiforce one first quickly, because that one is more, if anything, it's just a crazy coincidence. The Multiforce gimmick, for people who aren't aware, was in Transformers Victory, they had multiple bots that were able to do two individual combiners of all these different combinations, and then could all come together to make a giant six-man robot called Landcross. When we got into Transformers Superlink or Transformers Energon, the super linking, or the power linking as it was called in Energon, was just more or less a recycled idea. Was it 100% a nod to Transformers Victory? Yes and no. The idea has kicked around in a lot of other robot lines and stuff, and it has existed in Transformers. I think that the connection between Mach and Tackle, one being a space shuttle, the other one being an all-terrain vehicle, and them being associated with each other and combining, and then looking at those two mega-class toys in Ironhide and Jetfire, or their Japanese counterparts of Skyfire and Roadbuster. It's just a coincidence, if anything. More so just something like Landcross and the Multiforce wanting to have that crazy level of diversity of alt modes, and then the mixing and matching, and just pure coincidence, if anything. But I do see what you're getting at, and I'm sure that, you know, in some point, some customizers could probably make some good repaints to throw back to those old Victory designs. But going into what you're saying, though, there is quite a few. I'll give you some really good ones. I'm not going to cover every single one, because, you know, especially when you get into like Cybertron, it's quite a grab bag. I mean, I always say that like the tail end of Energon and going into Cybertron was kind of the early beginnings of what we would call later on like classics. Like there's some Cybertron and Energon toys that if they were released as classic toys as those original characters, you'd kind of believe it, because that's just how it was back in the day. But you know, when Aaron was tasked with doing Armada, it was all about like revisiting the brand, being familiar with those old characters, and giving people stuff that they felt was familiar, but still being fresh in its own way. So a lot of those initial designs were more or less original designs and at best were just like nods to whatever was pop culture related in the back of their minds, like see Red Alert from Armada and his RoboCop looking head or something. But as you get more later into it, that's when you start again, like I said, Energon, Cybertron, you start seeing more of those throwbacks. You mentioned again like Galaxy Shuttle from Armada, Jetfire, that was something that me and Aaron talked about on the Toy Armada. But again, it really starts to show up when you get into Energon. But there is some in Armada. I mean, some of the more obvious ones are like Armada Sparkplug, the Minicon, having that very Bumblebee kind of twist to him in terms of his head sculpt and the coloring and stuff like that. And then, and of course, Bumblebee is a trademark not being available at the time, which I'm pretty sure they probably would have thrown that on him or alternatively Hotshot. And then, of course, Armada Sideswipe. Armada Wheeljack being a G1 Sideswipe 100%. I mean, we talked about that one already on the Toy Armada. But, I mean, it's G1 Sideswipe to a T. That's totally what they were going for with Armada Wheeljack. When we get into Energon, that's where we start seeing a lot more of that. And here's some good ones like, Energon Wing Saber. They wanted to call it, Star Saber. They would have called it that if they could, but they just couldn't because they used Star Saber previously as a named on-screen kind of character in the Armada TV show, so they didn't want to confuse Star Saber the sword with Star Saber a character, so they both ended up on Wing Saber, and that falls on both the Japanese version and the American version, even though that character completely is a Transformers Victory Star Saber homage. And you would not be wrong to take Wing Saber from Energon and putting a Star Saber blade in his hand, because that's kind of the intention it was at one point. You mentioned Energon Downshift. That one's a little more dicey because it was supposed to be Wheeljack. In Japan, it's called Wheeljack. So it's Superlink Wheeljack. It's just they didn't want to call him Wheeljack over here because they were just like, well, there already was a Wheeljack character in Armada that was named, and he wasn't called Wheeljack in the Japanese version, so that's why they were able to get away with that. They was called Rampage, but that's a whole other, thing. And it's just, they were just like, well, we'll just call him Downshift. And then you could go, well, but, Downshift was the name of one part of the Skyboom shield, But it wasn't like an on-screen named character. It was on screen, but he was never named Downshift. They never said it out loud. So I guess that's how they kind of got away with it. And again, they just, instead of registering a new trademark, they'll just, hey, it's a car. We'll call it Downshift. Sure. Even though it's clearly Wheeljack, but we called it. It's the kind of the diciness, and that's why I always say at the end of the day, kind of just watch the Unicron Trilogy in its original Japanese form, and then save yourself a lot of the confusion and trouble, because the whole trademarking part on the Western side of things really mucks a lot of things up. Going into other Energon stuff, like a non-show character, let's say, Energon Towline. Energon Towline is a prime example of... let's take a trademark that's going to expire soon. It was an old Robots in Disguise trademark, Towline. Let's refresh it for the modern era at that time. And you could clearly see the DNA of them trying to do like a blue G1 Ironhide, right down to his battle platform tooling and everything. Of course, later on, that would then be repainted and retooled into G1 Ironhide as a character, along with Ratchet, getting that treatment with Bakon. But, I mean, early on, that was clearly... I mean, anyone who saw that mold was like, dude, this is Ironhide, like 100%. And what a unique toy that is, because the way the power linking works and how it works with the battle platform, very unique toy and a fun one for a non-show character. Everyone knows, of course, Snowcat. Again, Energon Snowcat being an homage to the G1... It's going to be the G.I. Joe design of the same name, so that one's no surprise to anybody. Also, maybe surprise to some this one, but Krulok and Doomlock, the Terracon dinosaur, was a nod to the Godzilla 1998 film of the same name. Even more so the Babyzillas that appeared later on in the movie. So if you look at that sculpt very deeply, it's that Godzilla design, so they kind of went with that. And going on that same smaller price point of the Terracons, the Insecticon was clearly Bombshell. G1 Insecticon Bombshell. They just called it Insecticon. Hasbro did not have Bombshell at the time as a trademark, nor would they have Bombshell for quite a few years. They'd have to go with Hardshell or Bomb Shock. They'd have to go with a lot of other names before they would get Bombshell 100% back as a trademark. So Insecticon was just the easy one, but very clearly a Bombshell homage in terms of design. And of course, when you look at the combiner limbs, that's just like a trademark nightmare. All those trademarks would end up coming back home for those limbs through the Creo line. The Creo combiners practically existed just to get back all of those trademarks. But I mean, you could clearly see stuff like Silverbolt or Vortex. Like, I mean, we could go through each one of them, but you pretty much know what those trademarks should have been for 99% of those limbs, but they just didn't have them at the time. And it was just easier to use pre-existing trademarks that they had already. So when we get into Galaxy Force and Cybertron at the tail end of this trilogy, that's where there's a lot of them. You got Excellion and Hotshot. Clearly, that mold is a hot rod design with the spoiler and everything like that. Of course, you'd see the repaints that would homage the hot rod colors and stuff. Even myself, I bought two of each one of those repaints and swapped the spoilers to have yellow spoilers on the Excellion repaint. So it was a 100% hot rod toy, because at the time classics didn't exist, and that would be the closest to a modern hot rod toy at the time for me. Little did I know, just the following year we would get classics, and of course our classics hot rod figure. But back then, sometimes you got to make do with what you got. Speaking of hot rod, how about his mentor? We got the character of Autolander in Galaxy Force, which was known as Breakdown in the Cybertron dub. He was designed by Eric Siebeneller, and when Eric was designing along with Takara, they knew that this was going to be the old man character in the show, the mentor character. So they purposely designed the alt mode and some of the veneering of the robot mode to look like War Within Cup from the Dreamwave comic books around that time. And then, of course, when they did the repaint of this mold into Breakdown GTS in the West, they gave him Cup colors because it was a Cup homage. It was never confirmed by Eric Siebeneller, but there was also the character of Jackshot in Galaxy Force. You guys knew him as Overhaul in Cybertron. I always totally felt that was a G1 Brawn mold and an homage to that, but never confirmed on that one, but just looked like it so much to me every time I would look at it. Again, all these characters that to me felt like early versions of what would be like Classics versions and Generations and Universe 2.0 in a lot of ways. And I'll end it on this one. Best, the leader class Cybertron, Megatron. Master Megatron, Master Galvatron. The alt mode specifically, which Aaron Archer always referred to as the Batmobile. That's kind of how he saw that alt mode when it was being designed. But Eric Siebeneller worked on that with Takara. And I mean, I'm pretty sure the Takara side of things also infused what I feel it kind of looks like that alt mode. One of the Cyber Formula vehicles from Cyber Formula, which was a very popular OVA anime in the late 90s and early 2000s in Japan. And you see like that Asarada kind of Formula vehicle design in the Megatron. And so I kind of see that too. So those are just a few examples. I mean, there's a lot. There's a lot, but those are just a few to chew on. But I'm pretty sure there's plenty more. But it was at a time when they were, the Unicron Trilogy, especially when you get to the end of Cybertron, that's that transition period. Because after 2006, we go into 2007. Then we got the Michael Bay movies. Then we're going into animated, which is going to be a completely different aesthetic style. And that stuff, of course, was mirrored on the other side of things, where you had Classics, Universe 2.0, and, of course, later on Generations, where you had original designs with your mainline stuff, and then if you wanted those G1 homages, that's where you found all of that material in Classics, in Universe 2.0, and Generations. So they didn't really need to do that too much. But, of course, that didn't stop Derek Wyatt with Transformers Animated and all those characters, and, of course, going into Transformers Prime. But that's a whole other story. So let me know what you guys think. Otherwise, mention your favorites if you felt like something was being channeled within a specific character or something that wasn't named that character, but clearly had those designs baked into those molds in that Unicron Trilogy era. But otherwise, that's it more or less, and I hope that answers your question, Billy B. But if you want to be like Billy B and be a Patreon member and help support the podcast and let us know we're doing a half-decent job, and come join us on Discord if you'd like. Again, patreon.com/protoman, or check the pinned comments or the description below. And like I always say, rock out with the robots in disguise, and I'll talk to you later this week.